Hello friends, welcome to Gehenna Valley. You may be wondering why in the world I named a video about such a beautiful and verdant valley to hell and back. Well, the reason is as follows. Whenever Jesus spoke of eternal damnation in hell, he called that place hell by the name of this valley Gehenna. But before we address that, we need to examine the progression of things that led up to that. For several different eras of antiquity converge in this valley, and I want to start from, well, the beginning. Back in the very first video of this channel, I mentioned that this valley is one among three which separates ancient Jerusalem from the various hills that surround it. The Kidron, which borders Jerusalem from the east and separates it from the Mount of Olives, the Tyropoeon, which is also known by the names Cheesemaker or Central Valley, which borders the city to the west, and this particular valley, Gehenna, which comprises the ancient city's southern border, as well as the southern border of the territory of the tribe of Benjamin. Therefore, technically, and contrary to the assumptions of modern-day Jerusalemites, is evidenced by the emblem of the Lion of Judah on the city's trash cans and manhole covers. Jerusalem is not in the tribal territory of Judah, but in the tribal territory of Benjamin. How this became so was likely owing to the machinations of one of our favorite characters that we have focused on so far on this channel, King David. Now, when David became king, he was rejected by every tribe of Israel save for his own, the tribe of Judah. And therefore, he was hemmed in or relegated to the city of Hebron, well within the tribal territory of Judah, about 18 miles south of here. And there he reigned for a period of 7 years. Now, the reason why David was rejected by all the other tribes was because they felt that he and his tribe had stolen the kingship from its rightful family, the family of Saul, and his tribe, the tribe of Benjamin. And therefore, they followed after one of Saul's surviving sons, whose name was, and this is not the easiest name to pronounce, Ishbosheth. Ishbosheth. See, I speak Hebrew and I have a hard time saying that name. Ishbosheth, 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 Ishbosheth. Oy vey. Anyway, over a period of 7 years, the partisans of David, under the leadership of his general Joab, fight the partisans of Saul's son Ishbosheth, under the leadership of his general Abner. And in the meantime, David marries a woman from almost every other tribe of Israel. Now, I'm going to take some creative license here and read between the lines of what the Bible tells us. And that is, I'm going to suggest that maybe what motivated David to marry women from each of Israel's tribes was to do something that monarchies have done throughout all of history up until recent times, which is to marry into alliances with other families, with other kings and kingdoms and tribes. After David's partisans vanquished those of Saul's son Ishbosheth, all the other tribes of Israel sent representatives to Hebron to anoint, or Messiah, David king over all of Israel. And then almost immediately thereafter, David, with his army, advances on Jerusalem. Why? What was David's main consideration? It is likely that David was pulling a Washington, D.C., 3,000 years before the Americans did. You see, just as Washington, D.C. is neither in Maryland or Virginia, Jerusalem is somewhat neutral territory. By somewhat, I mean to say that although it is technically in Benjamin, it skirts the border of Judah, whose territory begins on the opposite or southern bank of this valley. Therefore, if David's own tribe were to accuse him of behaving treasonously by relocating the capital of the country to a rival tribe's territory, all he would have to say is, look guys, it's really no big deal. We have the monarchy, let them have the capital. But it is literally just a stone's throw away from our own territory. Let it go already. Although his son Solomon would be remembered for being the wisest king of Israel, this move by David, if such were his considerations, would rank as one of the wisest stratagems ever employed by a king of Israel in order to further advance the unity of these often at times disparate 12 tribes. Okay, we're now going to advance closer to the theme of hell that I evoked at the outset of this video. Now, you may recall in the second episode, which I entitled I've Set My King on Mount Zion, that I explained that each successive king, regardless of their conduct, was considered to be the Messiah of Yahweh. But after King David, who is no angel himself, the monarchy descended into a state of corruption, chaos, utter dysfunction, and even murder. Now, perhaps the reign of King Ahaz, who ruled the country in the second half of the 8th century BC, represented the nadir of that era known as the First Temple period. And this is because his generation, under his leadership, sacrificed their children to the god Molech in this valley. Now, they did so by placing the children on the extended arms of a giant incandescent statue heated to extreme temperatures via a fireplace in the belly of the statue. And this was so grievous a sin in the eyes of God that it says in the Bible it even exceeded his expectations of just how low the country could stumble. Now's the time to address full-on the connection between this valley and Jesus' teachings regarding hell. Nearly every time Jesus taught about hell, he referred to it by the name of this valley, Gehenna, which is the conjunction of the two words Gai, which means valley, and Hinnom, which is the proper name of the valley. By Jesus' day, the local Jewish population was simply pronouncing an abridged version of these two words, Gehenna. Now, why did Jesus use the name of this valley is more than just a euphemism, but rather is a proper name for hell itself? Well, I think it was in part because of the history of the valley I just mentioned, specifically the sacrifice of the city's children to the burning hot statue of Molech, but also because by Jesus' time, the valley had become the main site to which the residents of the city took their trash to burn outside the city limits. There would have been, therefore, a consistent acrid stench and rising smoke from the place, owing to it being used in perpetuity as the city's trash dump. As you can see from this footage of modern-day trash and carcasses strewn along the less savory sections of this valley, some nearby residents think this valley is still their personal trash dump. What's that expression? The more things change, the more things stay the same? Ironically, the place of this maggot and fly-infested carcass of either a dog or a fox is also the traditional place of the potter's field, or Akeldama, which according to the Gospel of Matthew and Book of Acts, the bodily remains of Judas were disposed after hanging himself. Alright, Steve, is there any way to end this video on a positive note? Well, yeah, on two counts. The first of which is this. Nearby this Scottish church on the Judah side of Gehenna Valley, these two tiny silver scrolls, now housed at the Israel Museum, were found containing the oldest copy of scripture in existence, the Aaronic or priestly blessing, dating to sometime between the late 7th and early 6th centuries BC. This dates these scrolls to at least 300 years earlier than the oldest scroll fragments found in the more famous collection known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Evidently, the two silver scrolls were likely worn as amulets by their original owners. An amulet was usually worn as a pendant on a necklace or bracelet. It contained an inscription either engraved on the amulet itself or inscribed on a parchment contained within it. Those who wore them often believed that these amulets afforded them protection against curses and evil spirits. Besides that discovery of the oldest verse of scripture ever found from the Bible, are there any other positive developments we could take away from this valley of Gehenna or Hell Valley? Well, I said there were two positive counts on which we could end this video. Here's the second one. Do you recall when I said that the reign of King Ahaz represented the nadir or lowest point of that era known as the monarchy or First Temple period? Well, Well, how about this? The reign of his son, Hezekiah, represented one of the zeniths of that era. And this is because Hezekiah launched religious reforms, the purpose of which were to turn the hearts of the people and the nation back to Yahweh. This made Hezekiah one of the most popular kings that ever lived in the country. In fact, second in popularity to King David, and shouts from the rooftops that the apple can and does sometimes fall far from the tree. And this should encourage all of us, some of whom come from dysfunctional families or personal backgrounds. Our lives are an open book, and the last chapter has yet to have been written, and it's for you to write that final act. Anyway, thank you for joining me for another episode of Israel on Foot. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the bell icon, which should inform you each time I upload a new video to the channel. And please consider becoming a monthly patron of the channel by visiting my Patreon page, which is included in the links that I furbish below each video. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week for another episode. Until then, shalom.